All right. So this is gonna be a quick video, and I just want to sort of state it like this. It's pretty simple. Your perception of how things are is going to heavily impact how it affects you. So they kind of call this the anxiety of anxiety or the fear of fear. Forgive me for looks like I got coffee stains on the edges of my mouth. Oh well, I'll deal with that once I brush my teeth after this. But here's the deal, right? If you are anticipating, if you are overly identifying as an anxious person, this is one of the fundamental issues that will overrule all aspects of your life. You need unconditional acceptance. And that sounds so weird, but it looks like being able to accept being stressed, being able to accept being happy, being able to accept being content. So much of anxiety and OCD recovery is trying to get rid of the emotion or reduce it down to as little as possible. Of course, it would definitely be nice if we can completely obliterate it. At least that's the theory. And at the same time, anxiety serves some sort of purpose. And that might sound weird, but it serves some sort of purpose. Just like being happy, just like being hungry, just like being thirsty. These emotions serve a purpose. Now, somewhere along the lines, it might be misfiring, it might be inappropriately activating. But keeping in mind that your brain is working for you is one of the first and foremost tenets of recovery. Okay? Because for a lot of people, especially people who have not been able to recover, they see their mind as their greatest enemy. And for people who do recover, it's usually they have a better relationship with their mind. They're not so harsh on it and saying, like stupid OCD. Because you can get so scared of the idea of something that it's almost like Voldemort, right? Where you don't even want to speak it, you don't even want to think it, you don't even want to say it. And that only increases how scary it will get. Trying to completely get rid of the thought and force it to go away. If the thought pops in your head, you can just simply acknowledge it. I'm not saying that you have to credit it, but you can just acknowledge it like this is a thought I'm having. And you can even acknowledge like sometimes people they'll be they'll look at experiences and assign more labels to them than what they really are. So for example, if you have a reaction, right? If you tap something, one thing I've been doing recently, and I won't do it because my partner's trying to sleep, but I'll take something like this and I'll just smack it on the table over and over again. And why? Because I'm showing my brain, giving my brain data sets that, like, hey, this is not dangerous, this is not deadly, this does not need attention, this does not need problem solving. Of course, your mind thinks that. Your mind makes you feel emotions that feel very real, but you have to understand that feelings are not facts. They are not an indication of danger to come. They are a prediction, and sometimes those predictions are not very accurate. I'd say more than often not very accurate. And even if they are accurate, they are usually overestimating the level of hurt that you're going to experience. Of course, the other thing is just simply like that this is your life, and you have to start living like it's your life. One of the most obvious ways of recovery is by actually living like a normal human being would. And you might be wondering, like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it means going out and getting yourself a cup of coffee. It means spending time with your loved ones, petting your animals, going and walking, hiking, running, like engaging in activities and hobbies. Like me and my partner Billy, we do wrestling pretty frequently, a couple minutes a day, and that's something that like is a hobby of mine, and it's something that I'm not willing to sacrifice to OCD because it'll just keep taking and it'll keep taking and it'll keep taking. And I also recognize that sometimes, some days I'm going to wake up, I'm going to be pretty anxious, and I might feel that way forever. And can I accept that? Yes, actually, as a matter of fact, I can. And I also have to accept, as scary as it sounds like, that maybe I do have the worst case scenario happen. And if that does happen, that's okay too. If your fears will come to pass, they will come to pass. But more often than not, they won't, or at least not for a very long time. And we really underestimate just how resilient we can be when, even if those fears come to be. We are incredibly resilient. People all the time make it through atrocities, tragedies, and come out the other side. Maybe, I wouldn't say a better person necessarily, but they come out the other side. Now, of course, re- recovery is hard. And that's why so many people take their lives. That's why so many people drink. That's why so many people use drugs. Because there's a certain aspect of suffering that is unlike anything else. And I think acknowledging that is worth mentioning because I feel like a lot of these channels do not acknowledge just how fucking hard it really can be. It's the hardest battle I've ever had. Anything in comparison has been absolutely easy. You know, the working out, like for a lot of people, is hard, but for me, I look forward to that because it obliterates my thoughts in that moment. Walking, working, um, those types of things are not hard on their own. They become hard due to the mind. Making your mind work for you is important. And I don't have the recipe for success for that necessarily right now, but I can tell you that if you're afraid of being afraid, that itself can feed into so many different things. Accept that it can happen. And by accepting that it can happen, you can start to live more mindfully in the moment. I think so often people get like frustrated because they get setbacks and then they try to you know, deal with those setbacks and they overanalyze that setback. And even if that setback's a day, a week, a month, a year, maybe forever, you can still respond to it differently. You can still have, more helpful beliefs. I think that's important. It's, you know, one of the things about cognitive reframing is not necessarily just sticking straight to facts, which a lot of people do. And I'd not I think that's not bad. I just think that is incomplete. And instead, I think for me personally, one of the most helpful things I've ever seen in my own life, and again, this is only information for entertainment educational purposes only, it's not medical advice. Um, you know, but with that being said, it's just having helpful beliefs. Hope, hopium, you might call it. Hope core. I mean, I've seen this go around a lot recently, determination, whatever you want to call it. Having beliefs that serve me. You can call it faith, for example. And I think that's why, some religious people are so able to handle hardships and come out the other side better for it because they do believe there's light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of whatever evidence there is. Because for a lot of people, weirdly enough, the unfortunate thing that I've seen is that a lot of people who are suicidal have legitimate reasons for wanting to take their life. I know it sounds weird, but like, if you've been suffering, your wife of 25 years left you, your kids want nothing to do with you because your wife is gaslighting you, you lost your job, you've been homeless for 3 years, you're addicted to meth and heroin and stuff like that. Like those things are very like legitimate reasons for feeling suicidal. Now, notice how I said feeling, right? I'm not saying that you should commit suicide. And at the same time, just because I don't agree with it, doesn't mean I'm going to invalidate you and tell you you shouldn't feel that way. That's like one of the worst things people do is they just tell people, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. But like, how does that help? How does that help an individual? It doesn't. It's a subtle way of putting them into a suppressed box where they can't fully be themselves. And then the biggest problem, like, is that the internet is such a toxic place when you share these stories. I remember I was sharing a story, and I had to remove a lot of comments from my one video that I posted recently talking about this was a story talking about struggle, and I saw, there was a lot of good comments, but there was quite a few where it was like, just, like one person said better luck next time, which was like, oh shit, and then another person talked about, like, I saw a couple comments about like my haircut, which like was weird because it's not even like a ridiculous haircut, it's just a little ponytail, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even that big of a deal. Like, and even then, it's like, I do this for me. I don't do this for other people, right? But like, I just noticed, like, I used to get so upset by those comments, but then I realized, like, a lot of those people are walking through life very miserable, very ignorant. They're walking through life not with meaningful relationships, carrying a mentality that will catch up to them at some point. And I just recognize, like, that's another part. Like, our culture is not exactly helpful. Like, if you, I remember, like, even cringe culture is a great example of this. And I talked about this before, where, people simply being happy because they might be considered a little different. It's like, then we put labels on them like weird, cringe, and stuff like that. But it's like, they are a lot more brave than you, like somebody who goes out and feels like they can openly be themselves regardless of what other people think. For me, that's like main character, you know? I think a lot of people who say cringe and stuff would not have the bravery to do or express themselves in the same manner. I just I don't I don't really respect those people. I don't really, those people's opinions don't matter to me. They used to a lot, but like that's one thing as well I've noticed, like, is that other people can affect you to such an extent that you don't even want to share these stories. But the thing is, these stories are not for those people. These stories are for individuals like me who want to discuss the real important topics of life, who want to share all of life, the good, the bad, the ugly, who want to be able to figure out it. And I think, along the way, you're just going to encounter some people who just aren't the same wavelength. They just they can't they can't flow at a high vibration like that. They don't have the capabilities in that moment in time. And even if they did, it's not like they're putting an effort. So when I look at that, it's like I don't look at bullies as being I don't look at bullies and trolls in general as being high value people. I don't look at them as being somebody that's necessarily a bad person either. But I definitely don't look at that person as like, that matters to me. Because again, these stories are not for those people. They're gonna go around and they're gonna do that to other people too. And it sort of speaks to their character that they would engage in such an activity. Anytime you're mean just for the sake of being mean, it usually gives me, that's all I need to hear. I don't need to know your whole backstory or anything else about you. I don't need to know about, like I've always heard this story about like, uh, little Jimmy was bullied at home. That's why he's a bully. And it's like, I can I can acknowledge that you feel that way. I can acknowledge that, yes, indeed, you were bullied at home. And at the same time, you're still a bully. It does not change what you are, right? Like this idea that, this is almost like a get out of jail free card, or like some sort of, it absolves you of some sort of responsibility. No, you're just as responsible as somebody who did not get bullied. The difference is that there's a certain level of understanding that if I choose, and the thing is, it's my choice to forgive you or not and move past it. That there's a certain level of understanding that if I choose to forgive you, then I can take that into account. But at the end of the day, this idea that, we have to be compassionate to people who, would so much as shit and piss on our graves, I don't agree with. I think forgiveness is an overrated thing that heavily invalidates other people's suffering. I've noticed that's the thing, is so much suffering comes from, not just our own mind, but from other people and how they raise us to be. Like I know, like, growing up, and having the traditional man's experience in a very conservative family, it was like, grow a pair of balls, nut up, quit acting like a woman, quit. quit crying like a bitch. And my whole family was big into boxing, was big into martial arts, and it was never something I thought I'd be into. But then, like as I went on, I ended up getting into that, and that's the one thing I'm very grateful for my background. But our the only acceptable ways to express my emotions during then was to get really angry. It was more acceptable to be angry and lash out than to sit down and to cry in front of your friend's family, or God forbid your wife. Like that was just seen as embarrassing. And it wasn't just men who were perpetuating that. I see a lot with women who perpetuate that too, and uphold these stereotypes and strict rules. And I think that's such a narrow way of looking at life. Like, so much of I see these people who comment and say these things of what should and shouldn't be. It's such a narrow perspective, and it comes from a person who's never left America and experienced other cultures. Like, and or even let alone experienced all of American culture in the first place, because what it's like in a democratic state versus a swing state versus a Republican state, and even subsections of those states can be entirely different. And even being raised in one household versus another can look entirely different. So it's one of those things I find so fascinating, where I think people would do well to really be a little more loving, to be a little more understanding. It it's something that I think it's needed more than ever now, because like we're seeing a lot happen right now, right? A lot of things are getting better objectively, and at the same time, mental health issues are on the rise. So it begs the question of what are we doing? Anyways, I just thought I'd sort of sit here and talk to you guys, because I just find it fascinating to just sort of speak my mind on these things. I just, man, it's a good day outside. I'm probably going to go for a run after I get off here. Would you believe me if I told you it's going to be almost 60 degrees in 2 days? And not even like 4 days ago, it was like the wind chill made it feel like 5. Anyways, later, guys.